do something different with us than anything I'd ever been exposed to. Well, Al came there with me. We graduated, and then a war intervened. Some of you might remember that war, Vietnam. And in Vietnam, Al was terribly wounded. My class had 25 of our members killed in Vietnam, but the number of people who were not dead but terribly affected is much bigger than the percentage of those who died. He was a paraplegic. He lost both of his legs. He spent years in rehabilitation. He had to have artificial legs made. He had to spend time in psychological counseling. He had what they now call PTSD. I don't even know what they called it back in the 60s. But Al was terribly, terribly damaged by that experience. So what he did was he chose to prevail. Al became a person who worked with Veterans Affairs Department. He was actually in the government. He has been working with wounded warriors for the last 20 years. And that's a story of a very unusual person. But we all have stories. And the thing I want to talk about tonight is, what do we do with our stories? And I would like to at least incentivize, if that's a word that you're familiar with, you to think about telling your story. How do you do that? Who do you tell it to? What kind of process do you use to do that? Telling your story well will widen the circle of people that you enjoy being with. It will enhance your life. And what I'm going to do is tell you about the story I've told and how it has helped me. This is me as a captain in the Army. But I want to give you some guidelines, and I'm going to give you a takeaway at the end so you don't need to take notes, and I can tell everybody's worried about taking notes. But I'm going to give you some guidelines about telling your story. Okay? I'm going to try to motivate you to improve your ability to tell your story by telling you what I think being able to tell your story does for you. I'm going to encourage you to do something that most of us male people don't do nearly as well as female people. And that's encourage other people to tell their stories to you. I can't tell you how many people I know who have plenty of stories of their own and don't make any effort to learn anything about who their person is across the table. And it's not that they're overly self-centered. They don't know how. And I'm going to encourage you to learn how to do that. Because there's a great deal, and most women can probably, and this is a sexist remark, I guess, most women can probably tell you how to do that, because they know how to do that much better than most of us guys. And then finally, I'm going to tell you the story of my book. The name of my book is Project Management Without a Helmet. I was a project manager for a sizable number of years, and that's the book that I have written that Joseph was alluding to. Now, there are three kinds of people. You don't have to write this down either. There's lucky people. And those people just seem to fall into a string of good fortune everywhere they turn. Life is just a bowl of cherries. And it's not necessarily about money, they're just lucky people. Then there are people who are train wrecks. People who go from one crisis to the next crisis, and they're just unhappy, miserable people. And then there's the rest of us. We have successes, we have failures, we have good times, and we have hard times. And that's who I'm trying to direct this at. This program, I'm not going to try to help people who are already so doggone lucky they don't know what to do. And I really don't feel qualified to be helping people who have train wreck lives. I know some. And I really feel compassion for them, but they aren't really interested in what I'm going to talk about tonight. I want to start by asking you a question, and by the way, you're going to get a handout at the end, of thinking about who you admire and who you respect. Because that's an important feature of everything else I'm going to say. Make a list of them. You can make a long list or you can make a short list. You can make them be personal, you can make them be historical. It can be people that you've added recently or people that you've had on your list a very long time. For instance, I have a short list. I got a long list, but my short list is Abraham Lincoln, who most of you know a little bit about, and I've learned a great deal about. I grew up in Tennessee, and Abraham Lincoln wasn't the good guy. He was not a person that was particularly well admired in Chattanooga. I can't speak for West Tennessee, and I think that's terrible. I think Abraham Lincoln is the greatest man who ever lived. I have my reasons for that, and I can argue with people. He overcame more challenges than most of us even want to think about. And he freed the slaves of this country, and that were not going to be freed any other way than the way it happened. The next one is General Dick Groves. Dick Groves is the man that Joseph was talking about. He led the Manhattan Project. If you're a project manager like me, he is the top of the heap. The Manhattan Project was a $2 billion exercise in experiment, testing, changing. 200,000 people worked on it, and they all worked for Dick Groves. He's a very, very successful project manager, so he's on my list. Third person is my spouse, Linda. She and I have been married 27 years, and if I think about why is she on my list, it's really very simple. She has faced and surmounted more challenges than I can keep track of. Starting with her family of origin, a bad marriage, and most recently, and this was just last weekend, she has an infection in her hand. She was in the hospital. She had 2 surgeries in 3 days, and she's cheerful about it. I would not be cheerful if somebody was cutting my hand open, leaving it open, telling me they don't know exactly what's the matter with me. They're going to try to fix it. We'll do the best we can. My wife is the kind of person who says, well, that's the hand I've been dealt, no pun intended, so I'm going to do the best I can. And I admire that a great deal. The fourth person on that list is Joseph. And I think there's only 2 things that I wanted to say about Joseph that I guess
I gotta get a picture of that.
I think you should.
Be on a list like that again.
Jeremy will never believe it.
First thing is, and Joseph told you how long he and I have been working together, Joseph is extremely responsive to a worrywart like me. I always have questions about, I don't understand this, why is this way, where did this come from? I don't get this. Joseph is patient, but I trust him. And I don't make decisions to trust people easily. And I can't tell you what my criteria is, but he fits it. The second thing is, and I like to do what I'm doing, and I don't like to do what I'm doing, if you can understand that. I like to stand up in front of people, and I'm very shy. And Joseph has presented me with opportunities to try to deal with that complexity. And he has been very supportive throughout this whole process, and I appreciate people who are supportive of me. And I ask you to think about that a little bit, because I hear a lot of people find fault with other people and underappreciate the fact that a lot of people are more supportive than they give them credit to be. And Joseph has been very supportive of me. So, consider people you admire. Why? That's the question. It's easy to make a list. Why? Because if you know why, then you'll know something about yourself you might not fully appreciate when you're starting to have this exercise. What's involved in telling your story? Think about the stories you tell other people. Some people, like I said, like to tell jokes. They try to make themselves the butt of their stories. I know a man who's had 4 wives, and when you listen to his stories, what you realize is he wants you to not feel threatened by him because he can't get anything right. Okay? Listen to the stories that people tell you, and they'll tell you more about the person than they realize they're telling you. Well, think about the stories you tell. I love to talk about the military academy. I mean, it was a fairly impactful experience for me. And part of it is, I want you to think that I am the kind of person who can deal with difficulty. I don't want you to think that I'm General Douglas MacArthur reborn or anything like that. I was a captain in the Army and I did just fine. But I want you to think I will face challenge and do the best I can because that's my story. And I'll tell you more about me and challenges later on. What do you think your stories tell people? Most people, and as we get to the age we're at right now, can profit from doing some reflective thinking. You know, I'm 75 years old. I'm not going to live forever. What do I want my legacy to be to my children and their children? And God forbid their children's children, which is about 1 year away from happening. Now, consider something different than the first question. What do you want people to think about you? And again, I say you're going to get this in a handout, so you don't need to try to remember this. But it's important to think about what we do in terms of what the impact is compared to what we'd like the impact to be. It really is. You can refocus your stories if you want to. You can decide, I don't like the story that I'm telling, not because it's not a funny story or not because, and by the way, those of you who have spouses, if you can't remember what your stories are, I bet they can. But where do you start? You start with your family of origin. You start with the schools you went to. You start with the career you chose. Your family, your hobbies. That's where the stories usually come from. And think about what they are. Now, that list becomes your repertoire. You've got a list of stories now in your pocket. The question is going to be, what do you do with it? I want to give you some benefits of learning to tell your own story better. The first one is, you'll feel better about yourself. Guaranteed. Absolute. Take it to the bank. If you are telling people who you are in a way that you want them to see you, you'll feel better about yourself. And it doesn't mean you have to be 6 foot 4 inches tall and able to dunk a basketball on anything like that. It's just whoever you want people to see you, if that's what you're telling them, it's going to make you feel better about yourself. You'll trust yourself more. If I see people with any bigger challenge than not trusting themselves, I don't know what it is. That's really tough. It really is tough. Another benefit is pride. You'll feel better about yourself because you trust yourself. You'll find yourself less reactive to triggers. And you know what I mean by that? People who say and do things that get your goat. if you trust yourself, you know, this is just somebody over here running their mouth. They don't understand. Maybe what I need to do is help them understand instead of telling them what jughead they are. I think pride is important. And I also think that religion, in some respects, teaches people that pride is one of the 7 deadly sins. Is that what it's called? So it can go too far. But I think pride in moderation is something that people ought to have in themselves. If you take pride in yourself, you'll act like it, you'll look like it, and you'll feel better. Another major benefit of telling your story is stronger relationships with other people. Now, that isn't just because they are more trusting of you. There's another element to it, and I'll get to that. But that's another benefit of telling your story. Everybody has a story. Some people, and I have heard this more times than I can tell you, as I've gotten into this, I don't have any story to tell. Hooey. Everybody has a story. Yours is different from mine. Yours you may not be as proud of as you might be if you thought about what it was. And then the ultimate benefit, if you are honest with yourself, if you feel like you are representing yourself the way you want to, then you're not going to be afraid if somebody's not going to like you. You're not going to be afraid that, gee, if they knew me a little bit better, they'd be suspect of me. That would be, and that's why most people, by the way, don't tell you their story, because they're afraid of being rejected. Okay, I assume that you bought into that hook, line, and sinker, right? That there are real benefits to being able. What inhibits us from being able to tell people our story? Some people don't know who they are. They really don't. When I was a young man, I had no idea who I was. I was operating on autopilot. I'd been taught a bunch of things, and I was doing those things I was taught, and that's the way it went, right? I had no idea who I was. Some people aren't happy with who they are, you know, and by the way, I'm going to tell you a little bit of information later on that says I'm not happy with everything about me. There are some aspects of my life that, as far as I'm concerned, are a secret, and I'm not going to pass them on to anybody else. Some people are afraid, and this is really very serious. If you want to read a good book, read the book, Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am? It's not a hard book to read. It's very brief. But basically, I'm afraid to tell you who I am, because if I tell you who I am and you don't like me, then what do I do? That's the essence of it. And so people don't. They put up a front, a facade, whatever you want to call it. And some people don't know how. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit tonight, is how. Okay, this is not a test. This is just something to help you understand some training I got some years ago. There are 3 reasons why people do what they do. One is affiliation, and that's connecting with other people. 2 is achievement, and that's accomplishing something that gets put in place and looks like, feels like, seems like something you did. And then the 3rd thing that influences people is influencing others. Some people call it power. If you can get other people to do what you want, you'll be motivated to do it some more. And these are the primary motivators in a person's life. And I'll tell you, I was talking to my sister, who, by the way, is in category 2, if you remember category 2 a little while ago. And she said none of these motivate her. And I said, that's too bad. Why do you get up in the morning? If you don't care about any of this, why do you get up in the morning? It must be hard. Okay, What are the elements of a good story? Simple. The first one is challenge. What are the challenges that you face? I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of my challenges. They're different than yours, but mine are just illustrations. Think about the challenges that you face. Think about the choices that you've made. And then think about the outcomes. What did the choices that you made produce in the way of outcomes? That's a story. It's really simple. Okay? To do, some key symbols. I'm going to take you through something very quickly. I'm going to ask you to make a list of the key symbols of your life. Significant events, significant circumstances, people who have impacted on you. This is not a small task. This is worth doing. Okay? Think about the people who have influenced your life. Think about the events that have happened in your life and what they meant to you. And just make a list. Okay? Then you make a timeline. If you've got a lot of years like me, the timeline's going to look, and I'll show you my timeline. It's going to look pretty complicated. But you place these people and these events along the timeline. And then you look in there for the challenges, the choices, and outcomes that timeline tells you. And here's an illustration of that. That's my timeline. Okay? Those are the people in my life. Those are the events. They're not going to be a test on this. This is me. And if you see down in the bottom right-hand corner, you see something that says PM Without a Helmet. That's the book that I'm going to talk a little bit about. But you can see down at the bottom, I'm an engineer, by the way, in case you hadn't figured that out. I do things as an engineer does things, as logically and as well organized as I can. But I was born 74 and a half years ago. I went to the military academy. I spent some time in the war. I got divorced. I call that my time of trouble. I got cancer. That was another time of trouble. And then I published the book a month ago. And your timeline is going to be different. Your timeline is your own. I really encourage you to do this. You will find a lot of information is hidden in there somewhere. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick 4 timelines, or 4 challenges. The first one was West Point. What were the actions? I spent 4 years there. I can only say to you that if there are any more demanding set of what do they call it when you are finding yourself in a situation you had no idea you were getting yourself into? It was a very demanding time. The idea of the military academy is to remake you in their image as a leader. To teach you how to be an officer in the Army and to be effective at that job. And they do it by pummeling you with every kind of demand you can think of, and some you probably wouldn't think of. Never did I think about quitting, because I just don't believe that that's good for you. And that's a mistake. There are times when quitting is the right thing to do. And it took me a long time to learn that. I had it drilled into me, never, 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 never quit. And there are times when I should have quit. And there are times now when I do quit. I try not to do it with any degree of frequency. But it's not the worst thing in the whole world. Sometimes you're on the wrong path. And you have to be able to let go of it. And that's not easy to do when somebody has taught you that that's the worst thing in the world you can do. The next challenge was fatherhood. I have 5 children. My oldest son is 51. My youngest son, I think, is 43, something like that, one of those. The first set of actions were 18 challenging years. The only thing I knew about being a father was what I learned at West Point, and that's not good. That was not the model that one would want to work from. I was a martinet, if you know what that word means. I was very heavy on discipline and fairly light on compassion and understanding and caring. And my two oldest sons suffered a lot because of that. Then I had 30 more rewarding years of fatherhood. I love my children very dearly. And I love to be their father. And I do frequently remind them, yes, you're grown now, but never forget, I'm your father, and I will always be your father. If you count those numbers up, there's 48. There were 3 years that I don't want to talk about. That's when the divorce was. If there's anything worse than getting divorced, I don't know what it is. I don't want to find out what it is. Because it was awful. And I was not a paragon of anything that I want to talk about. It was just lost years. And I don't tell stories about it. Then I took retirement. And by the way, if you haven't taken retirement yet, a lot of people find retirement's a challenge. I've had 15 fulfilling years of retirement and hope for many more. Part of them have been giving talks like this. And as I said, with Joseph's help, I give a fair number of talks. On Signal Mountain, I have founded something we call a Speakers Bureau for seniors. We go around to retirement homes and give talks. And seniors are people too. So I've had 15 years of learning how to make the most out of being retired. I had cancer 7 years ago. And the way I chose to deal with that and the actions that I took were something I call the yellow brick road. I wrote my children when I was made aware of the fact that I had cancer, and I said, from now on, we're going to be on the yellow brick road together, and we're off to see the wizard. And I'll give you an update every time something happens that I think is worth telling you about. And I took what I think is a pretty fearful experience and tried to translate it into this is life. I don't know how it's going to end up. And about every 3 or 4 or 5 days, something would happen, a test, or then I had surgery, and then you go through more tests and whatnot. Well, what have I done with that? What is the outcome of that? I counsel, if you will, other men with prostate cancer. In fact, a friend of mine came up to me last week and said his PSA was, I don't know, 7.5. And I said, anything I can do to be of help. I had a specific type of treatment. It's not the only type of treatment. But us guys aren't very good at asking or even receiving help. And that's another outcome of me having cancer. And if you haven't had cancer, I'll tell you only one thing. It never goes away. Every year I go and get another test. I know another classmate who has exactly the same cancer I had, and it's recurred. That happens. And I live with that. So I've spent 6 years counseling friends. I'm not offering myself up as some sort of an expert. I'm just somebody who's been there, done that, and wants to be of value to those who are coming along. Now I want to tell you about my book. It's been a 14-year journey. That's a long time to be writing a book. Started here in Jackson, actually. I retired in 2001. I was only 61 at the time. Now what? And what I decided to do, or at least partially, I got an opportunity at Union University. They were going to try to put together a graduate program in engineering. So I said, I will write a textbook and teach a course on project management in that university setting. That's what I started out to do. Then I relocated to Signal Mountain. And the book went on the electronic shelf. I didn't do much with it for quite a while. I got very interested in doing historical programs. I have at least 50 historical programs if you'd like to hear anything about the Civil War, hear anything about the Vietnam War, hear anything about a variety of subjects. I enjoy doing it, and I got really much into doing that. And then last year, my sister-in-law had already developed pancreatic cancer, and last summer the cancer got to the point where she could no longer ingest food, and we went up and stayed with her for 3 weeks while she starved to death. And that's no fun. And I realized there's something I want to do that I haven't, you know, it's not a bucket list kind of, but I guess maybe it is. There's something I want to do. I want to finish this book, if only to give my kids. I'd like my kids to know what their father did with his professional life. So I got back on the book. A month ago it went into print. And I don't know if Joseph showed you, but this is my book. Okay? Well, that's great. Now what? I want to talk a little bit more about storytelling. And I want to pick on Joseph. But your values drive your actions. So let's talk about your values about money. What are they? No answers, please. But you got lots of choices with your money. You can spend it. You can give it to other people. I told Joseph, I don't want to try to live on what my money might be able to let me live on. I want to give some away. You can invest it. You can fix your house up. You can buy a new car. And what your values are will tell you what you ought to do. And then the question is what does that produce? Does that produce, and what you probably will find out is you can't take it with you. I told Joseph at the very beginning, and I still say it, I don't mind dying broke, but I'd like not to be broke sometime before I die. That's my goal. Now, this is a paid political announcement for recipients of those who know how to tell their own story but don't know how to ask other people to tell their story. Most people know how to do it better when they're the talkers than when they're the listeners. How do you get other people to tell you their stories? First, you start with taking an interest in them. You know, who is this person I'm talking to? Where are they from? My father could do that. I swear he was doing that when he was senile. And you didn't realize he was senile until he asked the same question the third time. It's just, it was ingrained in him to get other people to tell him who they were. My initial motivation in learning how to do it was selfish. When I was in the throes of the time of troubles, I had no friends. I was not connected to my kids. Life wasn't very pleasant. And I got somehow or other this idea that if I took an interest in other people instead of focusing on my own self, it was a way out of the pit that I was in. It's a way to get outside your own fears. The basic technology is really complicated. You ask people questions and you listen to what they have to say. You know, it's rocket science. It takes at least a master's degree, if not more, to be able to do it. It isn't hard at all. And then somewhere along the line, and if you're a narcissist, this probably isn't true, but somewhere along the line, you actually start to care about this person. But you want to know more about them, you want to be supportive, you want to understand. This is the crucial underpinning from my perspective, and I don't know that I'm telling you anything you haven't heard, to a relationship. If the other person on the other side of the table thinks you care about them, you've really got a place to start. They bloom where they're planted. not planting is not likely to grow. I don't remember the parable, but something about strewing your seeds on the ground doesn't get you a whole lot of crops. Now, what I want to do is talk to you about the book today. And I want to read you a couple of stories from my book. The first one was, as I was preparing to go to Germany and I was a wet behind the ears lieutenant, I was on casual duty at Fort Benning. I just finished jump school. And I was told to build a sign for the battalion where I just completed my jumps. I was assigned some other people to work with me. I got materials for the job. I took a look at a sign that looked like a model, and I got started. I had not yet developed any principles for how do you do a project. I had little idea of what to do except get started. I had no plan. I didn't even have a sketch. The result was a disaster. It was a poorly organized effort. The battalion commander was not happy. It was not something I took pride in. The only thing that saved my hide was a set of orders to go to Germany. The moral of the story is, when all else fails, find a different venue in which to compete. And that's my way of making fun out of my initial experience as a project manager. It was printed a month ago. The first thing that happens once you get a book in print is, now what are you going to do? How are you going to market this book? And I had no idea. I mean, I've never done anything like this before. I had hired this company. It's named as Ex Libris. And as I started to think about marketing it, something very, very surprising came to mind. Originally, now, remember I told you it was going to be a manual for project managers. It has 63 stories. I just happened to have graduated in 1963 from the military academy. It happens to have 63 stories. I swear that's an accident, but maybe not. But what it really is it's not a manual. It's the story of my life. It's an autobiography, thinly concealed in a book about something technical. And to be honest, I guess that's who I am. One whole chapter, I was telling Joseph this, one whole chapter goes into the descriptions of the characteristics of what does a successful project manager need to be like. And if you can't figure out that that's me, then you don't get it. Every single one of them are things that I think are important. Now, whether or not they're really important or not, I don't know or care. It's what I was really trying to do in all those years was tell my story. That's what I was trying to do. Then that led to this. Well, if that was that benefit, and it has been extremely beneficial to me, if it was that beneficial, then what I ought to do is encourage other people to tell their story. And that's what I'm doing tonight. You guys are a prototype. Nobody's ever seen this before. I made it all up. I stole a lot of it off of the internet. But it's really just a way to market the book, but also to encourage other people to derive some of the kinds of things that this did for me. Now, I got another classmate. I want to talk about him for a minute. He graduated, he went there with me in 1959 too. He went to war with me. He became a veterinarian. Bob is a really interesting character. And I say that with great fondness. He had a devastating illness. He is totally and permanently disabled. He cannot do much for himself other than he can type. He can type. So what did he do? He became our class sage of Remember When. He loves to send out emails to classmates. You guys remember what we did when we were plebes? Or do you remember going to the so-and-so at the such and such? people love it. He really is interwoven with what we call our band of brothers from 1963. And he took some lemon and made lemonade out of it. And we all can do that. That's what his story tells me. So, what's the rest of the story? I'm doing these book signing programs. I'm selling this book. It's for sale on Amazon. Joseph has a hardbound copy, but the softbound's a little bit less expensive. I've started a speakers bureau, as I said, on Signal Mountain. This is free to any seniors group who's interested. I'm going to encourage, and I can't tell you how much fun this is going to be. We have a very, very good Lions Service Club on the mountain. I want us to write a book of our stories. I think there's a lot to be gained from that, to get the members of the club to think about their stories. And they're all different. Everybody's story is different. And I want you to remember, everybody has a story. I talked to a friend before I came over here, and one of the things she said, and I've heard this 10 times, I don't have any story. I said, hooey, I'll buy that for 30 nanoseconds. You just got to think about the way I've tried to describe what stories consist of. I'm convinced that learning to tell your story better will energize you. And I don't want to say it's a walk in the park. It's not. It's work. 14 years to do this. Okay? And I'm not sure that 14 years is worth the product, but that's a different story. It's a challenge. Not everybody, I've heard this also, I can't write. I can't type. Okay? At all. The way I wrote this book was with Dragon. You know, you're familiar with Dragon? You talk to it, and it puts gibberish up on the screen, and then you start manipulating it. It's work. I'm not going to pretend like it's not. I'm of the mode that says anything worth having is worth putting the work into it to get it. I think, I'm going to keep repeating this every time I get a chance, learning to help other people tell their story is a way to build a relationship. Much more than telling them what a neat person you are. It's finding out what kind of person they are. Remember, there are 3 elements of stories, good stories. Challenges, actions, and outcomes. Where you can start. I hope I've at least got your attention. Thank you very much.
You know, I know most of your stories. I'm part of it. And I was thinking about it when he was talking. You know, just in this room alone, we've got doctors, we've got people who ran for U.S. Senate, we've got blue-collar workers, we've got teachers, we've got business owners. Goodness gracious, what else? I thought somebody else. Anyway, it's amazing in this small little room what all we're comprised of. So share your story. I know there's more here. Anyway, George, I can't thank you enough, and I hope you've motivated some people. We need to hand that.
And I do have, oh, by the way, when I wrote the book, I also bought 100 copies. So if anybody would like a copy of the book, I'll be glad to sell it to you and personally inscribe it. It's $20. They aren't cheap. Books these days are not cheap. And it's not going to be, my sister says it's dry. It's not dry to me. But it might give you some ideas. Feel free. I'm not I'm not,
Okay. We gotta figure out a better line on that one, but,
which one?
the pitch, we gotta fix that a little bit, but,
Okay.
what I would say is, I think if somebody would like to have some entertainment, it's entertainment. And I think you'll learn some stuff about how to tell your story and about what someone's life was like. Oh, I mean, a lot of y'all witnessed things that my generation, I hope, never experienced, but world wars, major battles that we don't know anything about. Anyway, doesn't matter if you were there or here. Everybody's lives were impacted by it, so you should share it. And this is his stories. You share it. It's good. I guess since it's my occupation